The European Value Study is a large-scale, cross-national, and longitudinal survey research program on basic human values. With its 5 waves since 1981 to 2020, the EVS data provides insight into the ideas, beliefs, preferences, attitudes, values, and opinions of people all over Europe. In this video, some of the 35 national representatives of the EVS offer insights based on the EVS results in their countries.
Hi, I'm Deskins. I'm associate professor of sociology at Tilburg University. I also hold the Jean Monnet Chair on Identities and Cohesion in a Changing European Union, and I'm the program director of the European Value Study Netherlands. Together with my colleagues at Tilburg University, we used the 5th wave of the European Value Study to investigate the question what the impact was of the COVID-19 pandemic on values and opinions in the Netherlands. To do so, we reapproached respondents who participated in the web survey as part of the Dutch EVS 2017 data collection. After doing our analysis, the results indicate that certain values, like religiosity or political identification and the left-right self-placement, remained the same from 2017 to 2020. An explanation for this stability can be found in the fact that these values are socialized at a relatively young age, and they're expected to remain stable over the lifespan, even though that adverse external circumstances might occur. However, we did find that in certain areas, values and opinions changed, particularly to address the rare and dire situation that we're currently confronting. We found that people give more support to political institutions, like government and parliament, but also to societal institutions like the healthcare system and the education system. At the same time, we also diagnosed some anti-democratic responses. People became more materialist instead of post-materialist. And at the same time, they were also longing for a strong leader and more experts that are involved in the political decision-making. It's something that we wouldn't expect, because particularly these democratic ideals, they're expected also to be socialized at a young age. However, we find that they respond to these dire circumstances, to the shock that we're currently facing. People are expecting for leadership to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is what we also find in our data. Together, this confirms the rally effect. When we're confronted with such an extraordinary shock, an external shock, people rally around the flag. They want political leadership to respond to these circumstances. On a national level, these results help us to explain why the Dutch people were so adhering to these rules that were imposed by the government during the intelligent lockdown. In the end, these measures, they curtailed our civil liberties to a large extent. But more broadly, the results also help us to better understand values theory. How do values and public opinion shift in response to an external shock, in this case, this COVID-19 pandemic? If you'd like to read more about our study, you can always consult the journal European Societies, which is published by the European Sociological Association. Thank you for watching this video on the results of the 5th data collection of the European Value Study. To access the Dutch data of the European Value Study, as well as data of other countries collected in the 5th round of data collection, you can consult the website europeanvaluestudy.eu.
Hello, my name is Elise Hems. I'm a sociologist working at the Institute of Social Sciences of the University of Lisbon, and I am the project director of the EVS in Portugal. In this video, I will present a very simple analysis combining 2 of my main issues of interest: values and attitudes towards immigrants. The EVS questionnaire contains a group of questions addressing the perceptions about the impact that immigrants have in each country according to 3 different areas: labor market, criminality, and welfare system. These 3 questions have been extensively studied and address a more general concept: perceptions of threat. Another indicator measures the belief about cultural integration or assimilation, What is it better, that immigrants maintain their culture or not? Since values are guiding principles that orient our choices, opinions, attitudes, and behaviors, I was interested in testing the association between values and attitudes towards immigration. The EVS allows to measure the scale of materialist and post-materialist values developed by Ronald Inglehart, that summarizing states that people who hold materialist values tend to give more importance to security, to follow the social and religious norms, and to be less open to novelty. In the opposite side, those endorsing post-materialist values tend to give more importance to independence and free thought, to self-enhancement, and are usually more open to change. So, let's see what values and attitudes towards immigration have to do with each other, at least in Portugal. This figure shows the mean values of each question for materialists and post-materialists. First of all, you can see that people endorsing materialist values agree more than those endorsing post-materialist values that immigrants take jobs from the Portuguese, that they contribute to increase the crime, and that they constitute a strain on the welfare system. They also tend to express more the opinion that it is better that immigrants don't maintain their culture. Secondly, we see that while materialists have all values above the mean point of the scale, post-materialists score always below the mean point. These findings are not new, and this tendency has been empirically tested with data from other surveys and other value scales. But nonetheless, it is extremely important in this sense that it gives an idea how values contribute to the understanding of social attitudes and consequently how important it is to keep the European value study alive. I invite you to explore the rich data of the EVS that has been measuring values and attitudes for the last 40 years, and I am looking forward to read loads of interesting and meaningful analysis of this data. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pierre Reshon and I am the Program Director for the EVS in France. I would like to speak about two main dimensions of values which are very often confused: individualization and individualism, and I will show that the evolution for these two values is opposed. Individualization corresponds to the will of individuals to be autonomous and to make their own choices in all areas of their private life without being constrained by others, by their family, their religious denomination, or the state. On the contrary, individualism corresponds to a will to always act according to one's personal interests without worrying about others, and individualist people are in fact very egocentric. We measure the level of individualization with an attitudinal scale including several aspects: permissiveness around morals, the wish of a meaningful and fulfilling work, give priority to the acquisition of autonomy and a sense of responsibility in the education of children, and finally defend freedom of expression and democratic participation. And to measure the level of individualism, we also take into account several dimensions: not feeling concerned about others, not being interested in politics, and never act to defend a cause. As you can see on figure 1, the percentage of people strongly individualized has enormously risen since 1990, going from 16% in 1990 to 41% in 2018. This rise is not very surprising. It can be observed in many Western European countries. Much more unexpected is the decline of individualism, shown in figure 3, 48% in 2008 to 41% in 2018. In fact, individualization and individualism are inversely linked. The more individualized you are, the less individualistic you are. In other words, the more one defends the autonomy of individual choices, the more altruistic one is. This is why it is crucial to distinguish between these two dimensions. The decline of individualism is never highlighted in the media or even by the opinion polls institutes, who are often pessimistic about the French society. They always focus on what is wrong in our society, without showing that many of today's values are positive. A society in which individuals are more and more autonomous in terms of choosing how to live their lives and are also more altruistic than before is rather promising, even if many problems remain, such as level of unemployment, poverty, inequality, and the lack of resources for public services and social policies.
Hello, my name is Fredrikson, and I'm a sociologist at Aalborg University and National Program Director of the EVS in Denmark. What I would like to talk about is some key findings we made in Denmark using the EVS 2017 data, investigating the impact of the economic crisis on trust within the population. The concept I'm focusing on here is generalized trust, which means how trustworthy a person thinks that other people are in general. When we decide to trust other people or not, we draw on a combination of our experience, emotions, and a calculation of risk to find out whether a specific person is trustworthy or not. Generalized trust means that you think that other people in general are trustworthy and that trust is justified in most situations. In contrast, generalized mistrust means that you, in most situations, think that trust is not justified and that most people are not trustworthy. What we find across Europe is that over the last 30 to 40 years, generalized trust has been quite stable in some countries and decreasing in other countries. Denmark, in this context, has been a curious outlier because generalized trust in Denmark has been increasing continuously from 1981, when we made the first measurements, to 2008. In 1981, 1 in 2 Danes considered other people in general to be trustworthy. And in 2008, this had increased by 50%, so that 3 in 4 Danes considered other people to be trustworthy in general. While trust had increased most rapidly among the affluent with high levels of education and a good health, all groups within the Danish society expressed increasing levels of trust from 1981 to 2008, just before the economic crisis hit. This increase was largely driven by generational replacement, increasing levels of education, and a high level of social equality and institutional stability. So we were curious to see what the impact of the 2008 economic crisis would have on the level of generalized trust in Denmark. Might increasing economic hardship and more bleak prospects for the future decrease the level of generalized trust, making Danes become distrustful of other people's intentions and motives? When we got the results, we were initially disappointed. The average level of generalized trust among Danes was around 75% in 2017, compared to 76% in 2008. So basically, the level of trust in the Danish population had just stabilized at a very high level. However, Once we started analyzing the data more in detail, a different picture emerged. As it turns out, only the average was stable, and in fact, this was hiding that we were seeing a polarization of trust levels within the Danish population. While generalized trust was still increasing among those with high education and higher incomes, trust was also declining among specific population groups. We can, for instance, compare the fifth of the respondents with the highest incomes to the fifth of the respondents with middle incomes. The first, high-income group, saw a 3 percentage point increase in generalized trust from 2008 to 2017. In contrast, the latter, middle-income group, saw a 10 percentage point decrease in generalized trust within the same time period, leading to a polarization of trust levels within the population. In general, we found that people with lower incomes and shorter education had declining trust levels in the wake of the economic crisis. And more specifically, we found that those who were most vulnerable to unemployment and economic uncertainty were those who saw the biggest declines in trust levels. This was particularly the case for people with vocational education that often work in industries exposed to economic uncertainty, such as, for instance, construction work. And it was also the case for people with poor health, who often have a more tenuous position in the labor market. So the takeaway from this is that those who were most exposed to uncertainty following from the economic crisis in 2008 were also those who lost trust in other people and started to see them as potential adversaries rather than collaborators. Generalized trust is an important resource in a country because if people generally trust others, even people they do not know, it becomes much easier to cooperate with other people, both in regards to business, civil society, politics, and in private networks. If, on the other hand, generalized trust is low, cooperation becomes hampered by mistrust, and people are generally more skeptical about other people's intentions, undermining social tolerance and social cohesion. What our findings show is that even for countries with high trust levels and strong welfare institutions, economic uncertainty quickly undermines mutual trust among those who are most exposed to these uncertainties, and that uncertainty may linger for years after an economic setback. We may imagine that the same may be the case for the economic fallout from the current COVID crisis and in the future from the climate crisis. The consequences can be lower levels of cooperation, tolerance, and social cohesion, threatening the social and political unity of a country if the fears and uncertainties of the less well-off are not addressed promptly and efficiently. Thank you very much.
Hi there, my name is Frederic. I am a political sociologist. I work at the School of Political Studies in the University of Grenoble-Alpes, which is one of the top French student cities located near the Alps. I'm part of the methodology group of the European Value Study. I've been analyzing EVS data for more than 10 years now, mainly investigating welfare attitudes and their political underpinnings. Like most social scientists, I am concerned with the rise of populist parties in Europe and its consequences on democracy. And this is the critical topic about which I would like to provide you with some insights. Scholars usually assume that populist parties flourish on the gap between people's democratic aspirations and what democratic governments actually achieve. As it turns out, populist parties specifically appeal to voters who are disgruntled with how democratic institutions function. I used the latest EVS round to address whether Europeans who are attached to democracy but disenchanted with the way democracy works in their country are attracted to populist parties. My analysis was conducted in 3 steps. The first step was to define and operationalize dissatisfied Democrats as respondents who say that it is important for them to live in a democratic country, but that their country is not governed democratically. By contrast, satisfied Democrats say that it is important for them to live in a democratic country and that their country is governed democratically. Non-democrats simply say that it's not important for them to live in a democratic country. On average, in European Union countries, dissatisfied Democrats account for around 30% of the population, with minimum values of 4 to 8% in Nordic countries and maximum values of 50 to 70% in Eastern countries. The next step of my analysis was to document whether respondents report that they feel close to a populist party. For this purpose, I drew on an authoritative expert classification of political party families called the populist. The final step of my analysis was to run multi-level models regressing on support for political parties with satisfaction with democracy, also controlling for a bunch of individuals and countries' characteristics. My results demonstrate that dissatisfaction with democracy does not significantly predict the probability of supporting a populist party, especially once economic and cultural attitudes are controlled for. This means that views on economic and cultural conflicts matter more for populist party supporters than views on democracy. The second key finding is that dissatisfied Democrats are more likely to feel close to no party when other attitudinal variables are controlled for. This result is fully in line with studies stressing that political dissatisfaction leads to political apathy and electoral abstention. This is the main takeaway I will leave you with. As illustrated in the figure, dissatisfied Democrats are more inclined to abstain from supporting any party than to support a populist party. Bad news for democracy, good news in that populist parties do not automatically attract dissatisfied Democrats.